Hello, I am Radagast, at your service. So, picking up from yesterday, this is the interview with the ambassador conducted by Martin of the English Drama Company and a Distillation and Commentary Part 2. So we left off basically with Ceausescu and the bringing down of the Berlin Wall, which really was the symbol of the ending of the Soviet era. And so changing the world equals responsibility. And an interesting thing is, part of, I guess, expectation and tying in with the idea of a savior. So I guess another savior type of motif would be the cavalry. And cavalry and cavalry are two different words. And so the whole thing is, when is the cavalry arriving? Now, well, the interesting thing about cavalry arriving at a battle is they're usually joining infantry. In other words, there's something enjoined, and the arrival of the assistance turns the quote-unquote battle. All right, let's be careful with our battle and war type terms. So for me, what the Dragon family and their plan, especially as expressed through the ambassador, because the ambassador is a huge part of the shaping of this plan and the driving of it. Really, it's even if you look at his crest, you'll see his more personal European crest, seemingly what might be called on top of the Dragon family crest. But really what you're seeing is it's behind him. So the idea of there being, once again, us taking the responsibility to start to push, to start to break down whatever chunks of the wall, which is the cabal. The cabal is the final wall, separating us from the people who have put aside huge stores of the commerce of centuries to allow humanity to flower in the way that it can. But again, the cabal is a wall that has to be taken down as surely as the Berlin Wall had to come down for the end of European communism and basically the end of the Soviet era. So for us to bring down the end of the Kabul area, we have to start breaking down that wall. I mean, one of the most crucial elements that anybody who's listening to my voice might realize, one of the biggest struggles that we have are the friends and family who sit in front of a TV every day and use that as their reality base. And anything that doesn't square or jive or resonate with their reality base must be silly, or it would be on TV. They're completely stuck on the idea that anything of note, anything that they should even consider in the reality, will come through their tube, and that's the tube of the Matrix. In the Matrix movie, they had you all these tubes. The tube is that tube, or any form of media. I mean, it doesn't really make a difference if you get your Fox News from the tube or you go to their website. I mean, it's the same excrement. And so one of our largest struggles is the breaking down of that wall, that media wall that has been built in the minds of our friends and family. I mean, this is a really big part of that. And so the changing the world is our responsibility, and how we do that with minimal trauma, and it is important not to traumatize people. This is probably one of the biggest things that prevents huge movements that might be possible. But as I said so earlier on, I mean, I think it was in my first one about trying to explain the message of the ambassador and the Red Dragon family. Where was I going? I'll recover that. No trauma. So that's where I was going. It was no trauma. And so, as I mentioned, I mean, arresting somebody like Dick Cheney, that made the news, would be very traumatizing. Some news outlets like Fox News would run full blast with it. NBC, MSNBC, or quote unquote liberal news outlets would have their talking heads with at least one going, well, this sets a very unpleasant precedent. What comes next? Pulling people out of the homes. They'll take you into they'll make up all kinds of scenarios to move you emotionally and make you think that the arrest of Dick Cheney means that you're going to get arrested next. And of course, all of that falls apart if you're not tuning in. So, no trauma is really important here. And also, just for everybody who has a sense of like, well, your country is a corporation. There currently are no countries that are not corporations, because like all corporations, they don't want responsibility. So they create a corporation that stands as a straw man person. And should anything go wrong with the administration by the shareholders and the CEOs, CEO would be Barack Obama, they can just say, oh, well, it's the fault of the corporation and they have no personal liability. That's the whole scam of corporations. So our countries are corporations. So that's one thing. I mean, that's something you can really Google. I mean, I forget where one time I looked and it was just kind of a registry. I don't know if it was the UN or something. And all the countries are like, Republic of Iran, Inc. I mean, Iran's in on it. And to me, part of really seeing the change from non-cabal will be when we start seeing countries decorporatizing, or maybe at least going to the level of limited liability companies where malfeasance can hold one accountable. At least I think LLCs allow for that. So, okay, what is that word? Rapture. Yeah, rapture. Waiting for the cavalry. All of that is do nothing. Again, if you want a cavalry to show up, find a battle. Find plenty of people to make enough noise that as you're engaging the cabal, the cavalry goes, oh, look, they're engaged. This would be a good time to assist. So again, they're and that's creating the bridge, because they're on one side of the cabal wall, we're on the other side of the cabal wall. So we have to start kind of getting out our sledgehammers and chipping away at that. Maybe even making a path for the cavalry. How about that one for a concept? So rapture and all that stuff, that's just an excuse for do nothing, and also it makes you a chosen person. Much rapture is, like the destruction of the world will come, but you'll be spared because of who you pray to. So, if that works for you, the whole, this whole plan, the freeing of humanity, mission, real truth, will probably pass you by as a concept. And paper money was invented by the family as a finance system, because when things really got going, when especially the original Silk Road opened up, I guess between like Marco Polo and the Qing dynasty at that time, So, like as I mentioned, all that silk and spices and goods were coming from China, and largely gold was going there. So that particular package from Marco Polo, of course, also allowed the black nobility to grow in strength, and there might even be, from what I can understand, that could be the real source of what might be the Saint Germain Trust. And so that financial system, what basically happened was you couldn't be constantly moving. Once they had enough established, instead of always moving gold where it had to be, they created a paper system. But the paper system completely represented the gold. It was fiat, but it wasn't based on hypothecation. And the Vatican is a branch is a spiritual branch of the family. And which is not upholding its mandate, which is why we saw things like lightning strike the Vatican at 555 when the last Pope resigned, the release of the doves being attacked by other birds, and somebody came out and sent me something quick, so I had to check on it, and So yeah, the Vatican is right now is currently acting as part of the cabal. The Pope is making lots of noises that about freeing humanity and ending slavery, but it's really with the Vatican. The whole maritime system has kind of its base in the Vatican, largely because the Vatican has possession of our souls, which is a collateral to certain entities. Let's leave it that way. So there's some serious busting up of some problems here. Exposing the system, truth and reconciliation. So that's going to be a really important part, because if we finally get to a place where we're actually moving forward, obviously certain people are just in that place where they have to have some kind of punishment to feel cleansed. So there would have to be truth and reconciliation for those people. So that would be a process that could go on, while other people who don't require that emotional clearing can get on with things, and the rest can catch up after they've, I guess, vented themselves. Middlemen. Yeah, the middlemen are the deceivers. I mean, one of the real problems with the old system was that it had hierarchy. And so you had ministers who were responsible for reporting back to what was going on, and of course the lies were told to enrich themselves, and that's just a lot of the breakdown there. Middlemen are people who act as middlemen are Vatican, Rothschilds, Rockefellers, the Clinton family, Bush family. Okay, disclosure. That's another thing about non-traumatizing of people. I mean, the disclosure is going to wreak havoc on certain belief systems. Now, as the ambassador says, this is knowing that we're not alone is no reason to give up faith, especially if you've had personal revelations. But many people might not have had real direct contacts of a mystical nature, and for them, knowing suddenly that there's a lot of beings that have been around for a long time with their own spiritual beliefs that might not include Muhammad or Jesus or Buddha. So that kind of sharing of cosmology can have traumatizing effects for certain people, and this is another concern always of the ambassador and the people behind him. Pyramids were to create portals and grids, all right, for all kinds of things. We don't want to get lost there. Creation versus the creator. What we have done ourselves. Excuse me a second. What we have done ourselves is we've created our own gods. We worship creations rather than the creator. There are people who I've seen, like Russell Brand, the Trues and whatever. There are a lot of women who are just gaga over what he says. And I guess occasionally that he does an occasional shirtless report only helps that. But there's and I think he puts out a decent message. But, there's this whole, oh, Russell is saying it. And it's a form of worship, and it's a form of creating idols. And that's just not, I mean, it's nice to like people, but some people really get overboard in it where they create an idol and then they worship their creation rather than the creator. Okay. Average person cannot comprehend all of this. Why not? That's my question. Why, what's up? what is part of the processing here that makes so many kind of go off on tangents? And it's usually emotional triggers, don't want to get fooled again, and maybe at a crucial point where this is the time where I said where Lucy does not pull out the football from Charlie Brown. Benjamin Fulford was mentioned, and the ambassador likes Benjamin Fulford because he believes that he's coming from his heart. And then, but Benjamin Fulford has sources, and some of his sources could be misinformed, and therefore they're telling Benjamin what they think to be true when it's not. And then there are other people who could be purposely giving him disinformation, knowing a lot of people follow Benjamin Fulford. Somebody asked me a question the other day about David Wilcock, and saying Ben Fulford says this about him, and I only believe Ben Fulford. So my question is, why are you asking? My own personal question to me is, why are you asking me then about what I think of David Wilcock when Benjamin Fulford is saying he's good, and he's the person who you get your information from? So that becomes an important. When somebody like Ben Fulford is considered your place for information, I like to read every single thing he puts out. But I'm listening. It's a data stream, and the data stream will kind of confirm itself at some point. Colors, the reds, the green dragons, the white dragons. There are layers of codes. There's like one meaning of colors, and then if you get to that one layer, at another layer, there's another layer of colors. So it's really codes and stuff that to get into too deeply, it's really just distracting. You might, this code, red is China, white, from what I know of, is Japan. Green will be more of the let's say the Muslim nations, as you can see in their flag. So you kind of tune in a little bit around that stuff. So there are more codes than reality. And 2012 really was a real passing. For me, as a person who is in Gaia consciousness or Sophian consciousness, that was when we kind of reestablished contact with the galactic core. She re-perked up, and now we're feeling that. And we're see, all governments, criminals, or unaccountable. Oh, mandate. And so anyway, not only did that happen, but also that's when the mandate for the current cabal, which runs in 70-year cycles, was not renewed. The mandate was not renewed. So really, on that date, the world did shift. But again, at deep levels, but deep, profound levels that will be showing up into our eyes, because it's already here. It's just that the effects have not been seen because they're still kind of growing up. The seeds have been planted, but the grass hasn't. Is just breaking the ground. Our governments are criminals, plain and simple. Okay, they're corporations, and just like you see the obvious corporations that actually admit they're corporations, the governments are trying to make you think they're not corporations, because that kind of reality would be everybody would take a second look, and that second look is exactly what they don't want. So all governments are criminals. The biggest obstacle of taking all this down is the ignorance, the not knowing of what's going on, and then the deeper ignorance of not wanting to know more. If it's like if you're comfortable in reality and there's certain data's coming in, and it's just like, I don't think that really makes me feel comfortable, very often that you'll shut that out. And that's a form, it's protection, but it's ignorant. There's a data stream, there's something that's actually asking you to consider. That's all it's asking. It doesn't ask you to believe. It's asking you to consider it, but the lack of curiosity to consider other things is a big part of the ignorance we're dealing with. And true history helps, and that'll be part of this project also, is getting out some true history. And much of even little illusions that quote-unquote the St. Germain Trust might in fact be what got set up by Marco Polo and the family then. All the trade that was conducted being held there. And again, the problem is where are the funds? They're being held until they won't be stolen. Right now they're under safekeeping. That's what they're doing. And then there was a quick thing about how the West treats things like suicide. When people do suicides, if an Islamic person commits suicide, it's all part of the sickness of the Islamic, and they go off on that. Where when Buddhists burn themselves in Tibet, it's seen as a legitimate protest against the Chinese. So you can see how they're the same thing. Each person is, and we're talking about just people who commit suicide. I'm talking about suicide bombers, and you just the whole way that they kind of treat these things, where one is a reasonable expression of spirituality and the other one is terrorism and satanic thought or something. Money will find corpse. Money will fund corpse. Run criminal government. Yeah, that's what. Yeah, the money being released will just go to the governments and that run the corporations that run a criminal government. Republican versus Democrat is just a puppet show. It's a puppet show for the. Well, I mean, generally, most adults don't find puppet shows something to watch. Sarah Palin. No, I mean if you want to get an idea that people are some people border on retardation, let's consider anybody who would think that Sarah Palin is actually a viable mind and emotionally stable person to run just about anything. I'm not going to say she's what I can't, we're not questioning her mother. Once again, we're talking about the ability to actually be mentally competent enough to deal with, issues that can get complex. And usually the complexity is not something that shows up gradually. The complexity is the kind of things that show up very suddenly. Oh yeah, there was some question in the interview about the various financial screens, black screens, gray screens, white screens, and again, as the ambassador mentioned, these can be distractions, and they're really only relevant to people who run these things. Many of the bankers he's met never even heard about the various screens, so they're really of little utility. The new system that's going to be developing will be more based on a basket of currencies, based on what your needs are and what your, as you go from one currency to the other, which gives you the best value, instead of using the dollar as the temple money of the money changes. They talked a little bit about prophecy. I don't want to really go there. So shift, and they spoke about the shift of consciousness into a kind of a Buddha consciousness, an enlightened consciousness. And this is really, the world we're looking for is, well, from an Eastern perspective, Buddha, Christ consciousness. For me, I would call it compassion or gnosis. But these are all levels of consciousness where we're kind of ready to engage at every level, including a spiritual, and be able to see the world that's around us, and not need a bunch of politicians to tell us what a good idea is, where we get together, put out our ideas, we find out which idea kind of really works. We're all clear about what ideas are and what emotions are. So this way here, when people are seemingly presenting ideas against an idea, if you're clued in, you can hear whether or not it's really a concept or whether it's an emotional idea. Trying to use a concept, but you can tell by the language where it's going. All right, I think that's my wrap up. I know I spoke a little fast, but I do have to get ready for some more interaction with the team. So I hope that helps to conclude it, and whether I get another video out tonight on another subject, we'll see. We'll see what kind of energy I have. I always try to come nice and fresh and ready to engage. So before all else, I see the God within you. Be well.